So we're going to continue on from the last video. In the last video, what we did was we took an input for num, and then we performed a calculation which ignored the input, so this input didn't matter, and then outputted the value of num. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually comment out this input by putting 2 slashes in front of it. So now when this program executes, it's going to first initialize and declare and initialize 2 variables, and then execute this assignment statement and then output num. So before we ran this, when we ran this, we know that 6 divided by 7 is going to be a decimal of some sort, but it gives us 0. And the question is why? There's 2 reasons for this. Remembering that integers cannot hold decimal points, the first reason is that num cannot hold anything with a decimal. So what Java does is Java simply chops off those decimals and removes them. So let's take something that's a little bit easier for us to calculate in our head. Let's do 1 divided by 2, which we all know is 0.5. So again, if I was to run this, I don't get 0.5, I get 0, because what happens is the computer does 1 divided by 2 and puts it into num, and since num is an integer, the decimals are simply ignored. The second thing to remember here is that when the compiler reads integers or numbers you write on the screen, if you write them without a decimal, the computer assumes that they are an integer. So the first step to solving our problem is, instead of putting the value into an integer, we're going to put it into a double, something that can hold a decimal. And then I'm going to output that double. So now when I run this, on the surface you might say, perfect. Now we know 1 divided by 2 is 0.5. It's going to put 0.5 into D. So we run this, and we still get 0. But notice the difference now. We get 0.0. The computer will always output a decimal if you're outputting a double. So again, remembering that the computer on an assignment statement starts with the right-hand side, calculates it, and then puts it into the left-hand side, the variable indicated here, the computer does the following. It looks at 1 divided by 2, and it says 1, since there's no decimal, is an integer. I will treat it like an integer. 2, since there's no decimal, is an integer. I will treat it like an integer. So what it completes is what's called integer division. So it completes 1 divided by 2 as integers, and since integers don't have decimals, it chops off the decimals and gives me 0. It then takes the 0 and puts it into D. To solve this problem, we want the computer to think of 1 or 2 as a double. So if I say instead of 1, I put 1.0, now when I run this, I get 0.5. But the computer sees a double divided by an integer, and since the double is the larger variable type, it takes more memory, it's going to generate the output as a double. So an important thing there's a lot of ideas here, and we'll do a couple examples in class, but the other thing that's important to understand here is that to simplify this process, the computer simply chops off the decimals. It doesn't round. So for example, if I was to do, let's say, 7 divided by 2. Well, 7 divided by 2 we know is going to be 3.5. If it's 3.5, we would expect it to round up. However, notice when I run this, I get 3.0. But, let me go back. So the reason we get that is because both 7 and 2 are integers, and so the computer is first going to provide complete integer division and then place the value into D. We know it's a double because it's a decimal. So if I say 7.0 here, the output will be 3.5 because the computer will see 7 as a double, 2 as an integer, and since there's a double here, that overrides the integer, and the result is a double. 3.5. This will take some practice, this idea, but it's important that you understand the relationship between doubles and integers, because often when we're working with mathematical expressions, we'll run into problems which are directly related to this idea of chopping off decimals. Good luck.